I'm Jason Kelce, and you're watching the NFL Report.
I'm James Palmer, that's Steve Wyche. This is the NFL Report, and that was the recently retired after 13 glorious seasons in Philadelphia, Jason Kelce. We'll get to a conversation about his career with my brother from Philadelphia, Mike Garafolo, who will also break down Mike Evans' contract and what that does for the free agent wide receiver market. We also have John Beck on the show, Steve, who's working with McCarthy, Jayden Daniels, Michael Penix. He also works with C.J. Stroud, Dak Prescott, Zach Wilson, all of them. And we'll also have Jeffri Chadiha telling us who has to have a big offseason in his mind. But one of those teams that's not on his list needs a big offseason. That's the Denver Broncos, because they are changing quarterbacks. Russell Wilson officially released. Steve, your initial thoughts are what?
Yeah, how about this? 3 minutes after it was officially released, Russ went ahead and posted his goodbye to teammates and people like that in Denver. So he knew this was coming. We all knew this was coming. So now the question is, where does Russell Wilson land? And this is super intriguing to me because, people are going to connect him to Pittsburgh because we're connecting everybody to Pittsburgh. People are going to connect him to Washington because he's from Richmond, Virginia, about 90 minutes away. But I'm kind of sitting here like, if the Minnesota Vikings aren't able to retain Kirk Cousins, they've got to be a potential landing spot, JP, for Russell Wilson. Sure, I think maybe they're going to draft a quarterback, but to have someone there like Russell Wilson who can hold it down, because I think that's where he is right now. It's kind of a bridge-type quarterback. To hold it down while they get their rookie ready, that might be something that they have to do. But this is, look, no surprise. We knew Russell and Sean weren't moving forward. And JP, what might the Broncos do? Now, we know they're in that 11, 12, 13 draft range right there with the Vikings and the Raiders. They're all in the quarterback market. What are they going to do to try to rebuild their quarterback situation and their roster, knowing that Russell Wilson is still going to hit them pretty hard on the salary cap?
He definitely is. They're rebuilding at the quarterback position once again in Denver as I sit inside the team facility right now. This will be, in 2024, Steve, the 7th different Week 1 starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos since Peyton Manning retired after they won the Super Bowl in 2015. They are looking for a quarterback that brings something different than what they had with Russell Wilson. Specifically, Steve, and we've talked about this on the program, and Sean Payton has not hit it at all, it is the ability to multitask at the quarterback spot, processing of information, ability to go through all of the dialogue quickly, ability to go through processing the defense extremely quickly. These are things that are highly valued by Sean Payton, and Payton just didn't believe that Russell Wilson possessed them to the level that he would like to. Now, what they do moving forward, there are quarterbacks in the draft that do that. They might have to move up for one of them. We'll see where they stand, as you're mentioning, as a quarterback option in the first round. But also you mentioned Minnesota. If they can't keep Kirk Cousins, which there are some people on that coaching staff there that I've spoken with, think it might be difficult to keep him, that is a spot that he could potentially land. The Denver Broncos. They are obviously interested because of what I listed, Steve. Kirk Cousins checks a lot of those boxes. You mentioned.
Do they have the money, though? Do they have the paper?
Broncos, they do have the ability to move some things around. They do have the ability to move some things around. And if anybody's good at kicking money down the road, we know Sean Payton did it forever with Drew Brees' contract in New Orleans. So they do have some flexibility, especially with the cap going up as well. But you would think drafting a quarterback is definitely on their radar. Right now, Sean Payton did tell us at the Combine, Steve, that we will get this one right, and he believes their ability to evaluate quarterbacks is superior than some of the other teams around the league. That's the interesting part of this evaluation. We'll see if Sean Payton can do that. But he said that to us at the Combine, Steve, and also went on at the Combine. We had a record-breaking 40. Roll the tape, LC.
Unofficial 4.25 in his first run, and he's going to run it again to try and get John Rose's 4.22. Oh!
He just keep running right out of the stadium.
4.21 official.
I watched the combine my whole life. Seeing John Ross run that, they told me you would peak at the right time. Time's now, so it's all came at the right time.
Just watched the fastest 40 in the history of the NFL scouting combine.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right on to Xavier Worthy, for running. That was my 30-yard split, back in the day when I had to run it at 4.21. Well, look, that was a big buzz. It was fun watching it. We watch it in real time. We love seeing the athleticism. We love talking more about people who really weren't at the front of the list. But what caught my eye coming out of the combine, and it's with wide receivers, was Brian Thomas out of LSU, one of the top 4 or 5 rated wide receivers, running a 4.33, and he's 6'3", 210 pounds. Again, he's a likely first-round wide receiver, as are several people, who we didn't see run or perform. Guys like Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., JP. And when we look at free agency coming up, right, we see Mike Evans of the Buccaneers has already been re-signed. I look at all of these stud draft pick wide receivers. Look at these guys. Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors out of LSU, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas, Troy Franklin. And now look at the guys who they're up against free agency. Michael Pittman, Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown, Gabe Davis, Tyler Boyd. Players like that. JP, I can't help to think that market for those free agent wide receivers may not be overly aggressive, as some of these wide receiver needy teams will say, we're just going to draft one of these guys because we know how the potential star power it is there, and they're on rookie contracts. You don't have to dole out the big bread.
Yeah, and I would even throw in teams that are not wide receiver needy, Steve, because of the rookie contract you're mentioning and because of how polished these players are coming out. When I talked to multiple teams around the league that sat down with those guys that are on that list on the left-hand side, they were blown away, Steve, not just by obviously how they play the position and how NFL ready they are, but how smart they were and how those interviews went so well. You're getting wide receiver 1 possibility with a lot of these guys right out of the gate. And Bucky Brooks has said it on our show multiple times that because of the 7-on-7 world, these guys have been running these routes and really since they were about 8 years old. And they're unbelievably polished coming out. And the other part of it is, if you can throw that graphic back up, Madison, those guys on that left-hand side are coming out into the NFL being able to play inside, being able to play outside,
Great
Steve,
point.
and they're being able to be flexible wide receivers for teams right out of the gate. And I think that makes them even more marketable. Now, to the right-hand side, the name at the top with Michael Pittman Jr., my understanding is that's the name the league is looking at right now, Steve. We know that this wide receiver free agency market's a little bit different. But what the teams want to see is where does he go if he's franchise tagged? Maybe that changes some of it. But with the added salary cap, this is a group that was usually squeezed. Where are the numbers for these free agent wide receivers? Because we did have a big jump in the salary cap. So where these two groups play off of one another is very interesting. But on that left-hand side, we could have 5 of them in the first round, 3 of them in the top 10. It is fascinating what's happening with the wide receiver spot.
Well, and James, you alluded to it. Let's just take a quick look, and this was great work by Clifton Dutton, our researcher here on the NFL Report. These are rookies who led their team in receiving. Last year, Puka Nacua, Zay Flowers, Jaden Reed, Demario Douglas. That's 4 led their team in receiving. 2022, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, both over 1,000 yards. Drake London. And then in 2021, you've got Jamar Chase, 1,400 yards. Jalen Waddle, more than 1,000. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Elijah Moore. These guys are ready. Teams aren't afraid to draft wide receivers anymore because, like you said, they've been playing 7-on-7 since they've been 9 years old. Though, they've got to have somebody throw the ball to them, JP. And coming up next, this is going to be some stellar stuff. We are going to be talking to John Beck, a private quarterback trainer who works not only with some of the best draft prospects, but some of the best quarterbacks playing in the NFL right now. That's coming up next on the NFL Report. Oh, yeah, we are back at the NFL Report, James Palmer, and we are now joined by John Beck, who's a private quarterback coach with 3D QB, their company, and this might be the busiest man in America right now, especially with these days. He trained several quarterbacks at the Combine. He works with a lot of guys already in the league. John, thanks so much for joining us here at the NFL Report. And speaking of the Combine, okay, you've got Michael Penix, you've got J.J. McCarthy. Would love just to kind of get your immediate review of how they performed this weekend.
Well, I thought they had good throwing sessions. I think that's kind of the main thing when you're a quarterback and you're there is you just want to let people, the coaches, see you now. What for some of them, it's the first time live. I know scouts and general managers and assistant GMs have seen these guys play throughout the season during their college games. But this is really the first time for an NFL coach to be field level with those guys. And so to be able to, Mike felt good about his performance. So did JJ. I mean, there's always going to be those couple throws where they're throwing to guys they've never thrown to. Maybe the route's a little different than what they anticipated, and it's not quite what they hoped it would have been. But I tell the guys, look, it's not about being perfect. It's about going out there, showing these teams who you are and giving them a chance to see you live. And I think both guys did a pretty good job of that.
John, I'm looking, talking to guys around the league. They really liked Michael's performance in this combine setting in the throwing session. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone with the way that he throws the football. I kind of want to look back to years past. Is there anybody that threw at the combine that you've worked with or that really dramatically helped themselves after everybody got a chance to see them throw up close? Because when these quarterback coaches and guys can stand right behind you, did that change or improve anybody's perception that you've worked with in years past?
Well, I think I'm just going to use last year's combine. C.J. Stroud decided to throw last year, and he probably didn't need to throw, but he decided to do it. And I just remember afterwards the number of text messages I got because guys were just like, wow, I mean, I saw good stuff on tape, but that was awesome. And I remember C.J. feeling great about his performance. He was happy that he did it. I mean, and that to me was – coaches loved that he went out there and threw. CJ nailed it, had a great performance. And so it's not like it really improved his stock. I mean, you kind of knew that him and Bryce were the top guys. But I think for a lot of teams, they said, wow, that ball really just jumps off his hand and spins so clean. And, so yes, it was a definite, teams really, I think, whether you can say, answered questions or got a great first look that really said, man, this guy's talented. That's the first thing that popped in my head. Yep, CJ right there. Did a great job.
So look, we talked about Michael Penix and J.J. McCarthy, but you also trained the Heisman Trophy winner, Jayden Daniels. And stylistically, these are three very different types of players. Like, how do you go about training them and prepping them knowing that they've got different skill sets and to amplify those strengths?
Well, I think I wouldn't be able to answer that question without talking about our team of coaches here. Taylor Kelly and Adam Dato spent a lot of time with these guys as well. And really, it's a team effort from all of us. Taylor Kelly's one that spends a ton of time with Jayden throughout the last couple seasons. And so the amount of work that they put in, yes, each guy's different. And we can't train every guy alike. And the things that we can recognize that their body's capable of or that they can do, we really try to capitalize on those things. And speaking of Jayden, he's such a unique individual. And I've really watched him progress over the last 20 months as a thrower. And he's so flicky with the ball right now. And his accuracy as he progresses through throws has really gone up. And I mean, you just saw it on display all throughout the season. And when you have somebody that's that capable in the throwing game now, and then he has the athleticism to go with it, it's why he had such a remarkable year. But I look at those statistics that you guys threw up right there. 40 touchdowns to 4 interceptions with a 72% percentage in the SEC. You can't do that unless you are a premier thrower. And really, that's where Jayden advanced in his game as a thrower, and it was awesome to see it on display during the 23 season.
John, when you look at Jayden, and we're looking at his size right there too, that's one of the very few questions about his game I hear when I ask around the league. Is this one of those things, you've been around so many quarterbacks, worked with them, seen them grow from their college maybe body to what their NFL body can become? Is he one of those guys that can put on, 10, 15 pounds in the first maybe 2 years? And how do you kind of gauge that or maybe make sure teams can understand that about his body type?
Yeah, that is a question that, people do ask. I think when you see his frame is going to be easy to add weight to it. I think that sometimes those guys that are the leaner guys just kind of genetically, but they have that elite, speed and that kind of shiftiness. You don't want that guy being the 220 guy. You're not going to say, hey, well, we really need you to sit back in the pocket and be able to take those hits. He's probably always going to be a little bit on that leaner side because of his game. But his frame is definitely capable of putting some weight on. And I think that kind of happens naturally. I've seen with guys, they have kind of that fresh out of college body. It's really only a few years removed from that freshman hey, I graduated from high school. I got that 88 to 195 pound freshman body. Well, that all of a sudden just continues to progress. And now all of a sudden they get in their mid-20s. They start getting 26, 27 years old. And now that 5, 10 extra pounds, it's just there because the body's maturing. But, when you stand side by side with Jayden or you put him next to people that are 210, 215, you see from a frame standpoint, that's going to be easy for him to add on as the years go. And as long as he can maintain his athleticism and speed while adding those pounds, then great.
Yeah, John, that grown man strength is what they, of course, they like to call it. Just that natural maturity. I got a question for you about J.J. McCarthy, because we talked about it on the show. Like an incredibly talented player, a super high recruit, but he wasn't asked necessarily to always win ball games with his arm, right? It's the leadership, those intangible types of things. What about a player like him who maybe when he goes to the NFL, he can show off a skill set or a talent that wasn't actually asked to be, enunciated the way it is with some of these other quarterbacks?
Yeah, well, this is a conversation we've had as we prepare him for what teams are going to ask and what evaluators are going to be saying. And to him, when you talk to him, he says, in practice, we were always preparing ourselves to win games that way if we needed to. We were always spending time on 2-minute preparation. We were always spending time on red zone reps, throwing the football. Like all of those things were things that they practiced a lot. So, it just was given the situation that his team was usually winning in games. He wasn't asked to have to go out there and win the game in the fourth quarter, except for one. And he did it, right, against Alabama in the Rose Bowl, and he did it. But when you talk to him about preparation for those situations, he feels very prepared because of the work that they put in, knowing we are going to be a national championship football team. Somewhere along that road, we're going to have to win the game that way. And so he has a lot of reps in practice. It's just his team didn't have to do it a lot in games.
That's great information, man.
I get that. And kind of grouping these three guys together, you look at the number of starts that they had, John, at the collegiate level. You had a lot of starts at the collegiate level. What are you learning about these quarterbacks that come to you in this process and they're getting ready for the league, but they've played a lot of college football now? The name that everybody in the NFL keeps talking about is maybe that was an advantage for Brock Purdy, right? The number of games that he played at the collegiate level. What may be about their games with all of these snaps that these three guys you're working with right now have played that gives you maybe, is it a different starting point? Is it a different conversation you have with them during this process?
Well, I think you nailed it. As you were posing that question, the first name that popped in my head was Brock Purdy, because I do think experience matters. I think the amount of games you've played in college, and not only the number of games, but the experiences that you've had in those games. What have you been asked to do? What has your team needed from you? I mean, when I was young in the league, Bill Parcells had the, these are my things that a quarterback has to have done in college or I will not consider taking them. And some of those were tied back to experience. So as I look at these guys, yes, I do think the timetable can be different. Right now in the NFL, when you select a guy high, it's very difficult to hold off from playing him, especially if the team's not winning ball games early. So, hey, you may have a plan to take a guy and say, hey, we're going to let this guy sit a little bit. We're going to let this guy develop. But you don't always get that opportunity because of the situation that your team is in. And so guys can be forced to play earlier than they probably should. And I think when you look at all of these quarterbacks, that's something you got to take into consideration. Okay, we love this guy. We're intrigued by him. We think he's talented. We want to take this guy. When might we have to play him? Do we have the luxury of giving him some time to develop? Or is he going to be one of those guys where if we don't start off great at the beginning of the season with another quarterback, there's going to be that pressure for us to put our first-round quarterback out on the field. And now, depending on the experiences that he's had, depending on the situations he's played in games, even offenses. Two of those guys have had to switch offenses when they switched universities.
Right.
And it's no knock on JJ, but he got to play in one offense the entire time, and it benefited him. And that's one of the reasons why those guys got to be so successful. And so it's just tough because you don't know the situation they're going to land in. You don't know the timetable of when they got to be a starter, but experience always, always helps when you are thrust into the scene.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I do think the evaluation, because of Brock Purdy, the NFL evaluation on these quarterbacks might be a little different. Hey, Michael Penix played 5 years, right? So we can put him in because he's played in big games. He's seen circumstances someone who's only played, 18 or 19 games hasn't. But I want to get to your other point of playing a guy early, and that's you worked with C.J. Stroud. And we saw how he came in and had arguably the greatest rookie quarterback season of anybody. Knowing him and working with him, how does he take it to the next level?
Oh, man. Well, first off, anytime you have that type of success early, now there comes an expectation.
Right.
And I think, one of the cool things about CJ's stories last year was who expected the Houston Texans with, a rookie quarterback to do what they did. And so there wasn't really an expectation. These guys probably at times got to feel like they're playing a little bit with house money. Now, that doesn't take away from the pressure. Every NFL team feels pressure on Sundays, especially a team that had an opportunity to make a playoff run, right? To get into the playoffs, to win the division and all of that. So they understand pressure. Now the pressure is going to be a little bit different, right? Because now there's a bit of an expectation, you know? And so to CJ, my guess is, and there's probably a reason why he's already started his offseason work, is because he's saying, I like that expectation. I like that. As a competitive guy, the way that he's built, he's saying, fine, this is what I always wanted it to be. So now I'm going to just try to advance in every way I possibly can. And it's actually going to go back to that word of experience. Now here's a young man that has an entire rookie year under his belt. That is just going to do nothing but help him. He gets to keep the same offense, same coordinator, same crew of guys around him. It's going to be great to see his progression over this offseason into the next season.
I'm going to stay in the state of Texas because you also work with Dak Prescott. You've done it several off seasons. And I love an added aspect of his game that maybe we saw in years past, John, but was kind of gone for a sense, was him creating and playing outside the pocket. When I talked to people in Dallas, they were so excited to have that back. They said maybe it was the fear of the injury. They're not entirely sure. But that added back into his game. What did you like about Dak's year that he had? And maybe were there any conversations you guys had heading into last year that you maybe wanted to add that aspect or saw that other aspect? I'm kind of curious for your take.
Well, I think that's a natural part of Dak's game. I do think that the injury, a few years back definitely impacted that. And I watched that guy just work relentless for years to come back from that, right? And it takes time. I mean, that was a significant injury. That is not just something that you quickly overcome. So, I mean, Dak is one of the most competitive dudes I've ever been around. He works so hard. And I think, things kind of came together this year that allowed him to be that version of himself, to create. And he created a lot of plays. I thought he had an outstanding year. I know it ended in a tough way. It was really bitter taste in those guys' mouth to have the season that showed a lot of signs of promise end that way. But I'm seeing these clips right here. I mean, that to me is all of the things that Dak possesses. And to come back from that injury, it's a testament of Dak's work that he put in, and also the team of people around him, the medical staff and the PT people that put time into helping him get back to that place. That's what he's capable of right there. All those things that we saw this year. I mean, there was a stretch of games where it looked like he was one of the favorites to be the MVP.
Right.
And so, it's great to see Dak back in that place. And as he gets working this offseason, I'm sure he's going to continue to just want to keep growing in all those areas that he can. And with what happened last year, there's probably that mindset to really just grind and get after it this year. And it should be a great offseason for him.
Yeah, I'm only got about 45 seconds here, but you also work with Zach Wilson, whose career with the Jets looks like it's coming to an end. It seems like, the Jets, when you hear what they're saying, that, he's going to be gone from there. How does a young man who's been through everything he's been through get his confidence back, even to play as a backup? Like, how do you know him? How does he get it back to really feel like playing football is fun again?
Well, Zach's a gritty kid. And this experience that he had at the New York Jets, I know that he probably wishes it would have gone a little bit different. But just like anybody has to do in life, you just have to stay gritty. You got to push through. You got to stay persistent. And that's exactly what he's doing. And I think an opportunity, to be able to continue to grow somewhere would be exactly what he needs. And I think he's excited for the offseason. Look, life sometimes just throws these major curveballs, man. And it would have been really cool to see things go great for Zach, for the coaches that were there. I mean, I had a chance to be in that building. There's a lot of good dudes in that building. It just didn't work. And sometimes that happens in the NFL. And it doesn't mean that the player's not talented or the coaches. I mean, it's just sometimes it doesn't work. And so I think an opportunity to kind of reset and use all that experience that he has. I mean, the kid's played in 30-something football games. And like I mentioned before, like, he's a tough kid. And this situation that he's had to go through is just going to make him tougher. And, then you just move on from there and you stay positive and you hope that he can land a place that's going to allow him to continue to grow.
Awesome stuff. John, we're going to talk to you for probably the duration of our entire show because I love what you guys do at 3DQB. It's not like you just prepare guys for the draft. I mean, they keep coming back for a reason because you're doing such a good job keeping them playing at a high level and adding to the way they're playing. This isn't just prepping them for the draft. This is keeping quarterbacks playing at a high level, and you guys do a brilliant job of it. So thank you so much for taking the time, John, to spend some time with Steve and I.
Oh, yeah, you guys are welcome. Thank you for the kind words, man. I love this job. I love working with these guys. And it's like you said, like when I get a chance to work with these young guys, J.J. McCarthy, Mike Penix, Jayden Daniels, these are guys we've been training for three plus years. So I love just trying to help these guys with not only this process, but, man, their career. And so thank you for noticing that. I appreciate the kind words.
Yeah. Oh, anytime, John. And we're going to welcome you back multiple times, hopefully. Coming up on the NFL Report, it's going to be Mike Evans going back to Tampa Bay. The man who broke the story, my good buddy Mike Garafolo, the insider for this show, joins Steve and I next on the NFL Report. Welcome back to the NFL Report. James Palmer, Steve Wyche with you. Things just feel more comfortable now, don't they, Steve? We have our NFL Report insider, Mike Garafolo, back with us, and everything just is all right with the world. We had a wonderful time in Indianapolis, Mike. We broke bread a couple of times. One was touch and go for a second there, but we made it out all right. And you break the news now that we're out of Indianapolis with Mike Evans re-signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How does this go down? And then also, how does this impact the rest of the wide receiver free agent market with the guy at the top of the class now re-signing?
As I left Indianapolis, James, I thought that this was going to go the other way. I thought Mike Evans was going to get a fresh start somewhere else. Didn't seem like the Buccaneers' efforts in Indianapolis with Derrick Gilmore, who is Mike Evans' agent, were going to result in a deal. But things changed within the last couple of days, and the Bucs really stepped up within the last couple of days because the buzz in Indianapolis was a bunch of teams were getting ready to pounce on Mike Evans here, who's going to be 31, but yet still commanding not top of the receiver market because this is going to be into the 30s, but we're talking about $26 million per season over 2 years. But he tied for the league-leading touchdowns last year and has been at a 1,000-yard clip for his entire career. So this is a big retain by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are also still looking to retain Baker Mayfield. I think in the end that winds up happening and could happen this week, well before the start of free agency. It sounds like they had fruitful talks in Indianapolis between Baker Mayfield's representatives and the Buccaneers, but there is still work to do, and there's still going to be other teams that could potentially be interested. But getting Evans back, that is going to be a big incentive for Mayfield to return. You talked about that receiver market. If you want to call Evans the top guy there, Michael Pittman with the Colts, one way or another, he's going to stay in Indianapolis, whether it's the franchise tag or whatnot. T. Higgins already been franchise tagged. So, you know, Calvin Ridley now looking like he's going to be at the top of the market. Hollywood Brown, Odell. I mean, it's not the deepest class. Gabe Davis, that's a big body guy if you want to compare to Mike Evans. Mike Williams, who could come free from the Chargers, another big body guy. So if I'm those guys, I say, okay, this guy just came off the market as that prototypical big body X-type guy. That should help me, I think, if you're looking at those guys.
Yeah, Mike, James and I talked earlier in the show, though, about how all of these outstanding rookies coming out could really negatively impact guys like the Gabe Davises and the Marquise Browns of the world. Mike, let's get to the fact that the franchise tag deadline expires Tuesday, right? And we could have guys like Stone Cold Jones and Christian Wilkins hitting free agency. What does that mean, especially when you look at, you know, some of the draft analyst rankings? Defensive tackle is probably one of the thinner positions among the prospects this year.
That's what it means.
Chris Jones, exactly. Chris Jones, who this year took a hit to come back to the Kansas City Chiefs here, sitting out that first game, and then hitting the sack incentive in Week 18. I'm laughing because I can't forget the scene of his teammates celebrating with him in Week 18 when he got that. What a scene that was. Look, still at the top of his game. Great. Still at the top of his interview game because if you watch James Palmer get Chris Jones after a big game, you know there's going to be something special in that one-on-one interview. And listen, he may stay in the AFC West, James. He may stay in the exactly. So you may still continue to get your chances with these games that you're covering to get Chris Jones. You just got to beat the Chiefs when he faces them if he wants to be with James Palmer, because you got to win the thing to get with Palmer. But yeah, listen, between him and Christian Wilkins, Wilkins a terrific player. The Dolphins have made several attempts to kind of lock him up and get him under contract. Hasn't quite happened to this point. So yeah, those two guys, big bags of money coming their way.
Oh, hold up, Mike. Hold up. You said he may stay in the AFC West. You cannot leave. You cannot leave us hanging here, brother. There's only 3 other teams. You got to help us out.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, multiple teams in the AFC West need help with the defensive line. I'm just saying the place where he played his last game as a Chief, maybe his first game as somebody. I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know. Who knows? And it could be that the team is traveling to Vegas for week 1. Maybe that's what I'm saying. I don't know. I haven't seen an advanced schedule. I have no idea. I'm just trying to find a way to not allude to the fact that it's the Raiders I'm talking about.
Well done. Hey, well done, brother. Good job, Mike.
I love that because I think about this, Mike. Like, you look at what's going on in Kansas City, and it looks like they're going to, tag L'Jarius Sneed, and then they're going to let him maybe possibly seek a trade, or they could end up dealing him in a sense. That could also come into play. That's some of their thinking. If they can get Chris Jones under 30, I don't know if that's possible. When we're talking about how desperate some of these teams may be at the defensive tackle spot, is that realistic? But maybe that's part of the Chiefs thinking of trying to bring him back. Also, 2 other names I look at in a position that's just fascinating. It's not deep in the draft. It's the running back spot. And then you have 2 names like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry out there. I bring them up because they're not normal human beings playing the running back position. Their skill set, their ability, almost outliers in a lot of people's minds. Where do things stand at the running back spot with those 2 guys? Because it's similar to the D tackle spot with not a lot of guys coming out in the draft there.
Yeah, it does feel like Derrick Henry is going to have a fresh start somewhere else. I mean, I know we've connected him so often to the Baltimore Ravens, who have a bunch of free agents at the running back position on their own right. So perhaps they'll just say, all right, we'll let those guys go and bring in Derrick Henry and finally connect on what we've been speculating about at trade deadlines and otherwise. Look, it's going to be the haves and the have-nots again at the running back position. There's going to be that same cliff that you always have because you can go out there and try and make a run at Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs. And even if Tony Pollard, I don't think is going to be in that echelon. But then you fall off and you've got either veteran guys like Ezekiel Elliott you can go after, or the DeAndre Swifts or Zach Mosses. I mean, Zach Moss is going to wind up getting a nice payday for himself. But these guys are looking to be up in the double digits, which is where that franchise tag was last year. Now, I'm told that Saquon Barkley and the Giants had good discussions in Indianapolis, which is fine. I just think in the end for Barkley, it's going to depend on, and not that this is a cop-out, but this is my way of answering it, it's going to depend on what everybody else is going to be willing to do, I truly believe, because the Giants are going to make a run at this, but the Giants started at a certain number, which was what, $12.5 million per year, I want to say, back in October of 2022. Right. And then that number wound up coming down each time they made a run at it, and I don't know where it's going to wind up being on this go-around. But again, I do know that they had good conversations, so much as last year when the deadline to do a deal with Barkley in July came and went, and I said, well, that's it. This is going to be his last year with the Giants. And then shortly thereafter, I had some conversations with folks in the building. They said, no, we're going to make a run at this. We still want this guy around. It's just they couldn't agree quite on the compensation. So I'm not ruling his chances out of re-signing with the Giants. We'll be tracking it as we get closer here.
I cannot see how the Cowboys don't try to make a move for him. He just fits what they do in their run game so well, the dual threat he possesses, and going to get back at the Giants. That would be a nice little taste of honey on the top of that. Mike, as you button up here, we know you're on the Eagles a lot. We saw Jason Kelce announce his retirement on Monday. Just your thoughts, maybe just on his career, the retirement, his future place potentially in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Just anything, because you've been around him an awful lot.
The biggest thing is the way that he and the community and the city of Philadelphia jibed over the years. And, he made it sound simple. It's not simple, right? Like, yes, you got to play hard, right? But there's other elements to it. You got to be really good. You got to be really good. Let's not forget about that at what you do. You've got to play hard, yes. But you also, you don't make any excuses. You certainly can't snap back. If you ever take a shot back at the fans, that'll be the death knell. Most likely for your relationship with the organization, or with the city, excuse me. But I thought he understood the market maybe better than anybody I have ever seen in my time growing up in Philadelphia, rooting for these teams and covering these teams. I stopped being an Eagles fan when I was covering the Eagles because you got to be objective. It's just so hard to be a fan anymore. So his time playing with the Eagles, I wasn't a fan of the team, but the way that I covered him and the way that I saw that he handled the media and the relationship with the organization and the fan base is unlike anything I've ever seen. You've got to appreciate that. I would imagine he's still going to have a role within the organization. It sounds like it could be as big of a role as he pretty much wants. But there are other things that have already come across his plate right now. Offers to do things way outside of the realm of traditional NFL football players' opportunities. I'm not supposed to say the one that I heard, which is the most interesting. We'll see if it winds up happening. But it is incredible the way that he is registered with that fan base, with that city. I'm sorry, James, I can't do it. With that fan base, with that city, and the way that now over the last couple of years has translated nationally as well.
Real quick, and Madison, I'm sorry for this, but I got to take it to you. I got two Philly guys here. Where does he kind of rank? You know, kind of dovetailing off what Mike said. Where does he rank with both you guys on some of the greatest athletes in terms of that community relation, whatever, among Philly folks?
James, you go first.
He might be one. I don't think anybody else had a keg of beer waiting for them outside of their press conference like Jason had today from fans. I mean, Dr. J's legacy is still ridiculous. Chase Utley had an unbelievable relationship, but none of them were as active in the community probably as Jason has been.
Yeah, Chase probably. I mean, you know, Mike Schmidt and the city did not get along well at times. No. Now, that's over the years has changed, you know, with distance from those moments. Obviously, people have come to appreciate it. You know, when I was growing up, Eric Lindros was huge, and he didn't have a great relationship with the city of Philadelphia.
No.
And the media down there as well. So for Jason Kelce, I think it was, you know, as I said
Iverson was
earlier,
pretty strong.
Yeah, but Iverson had off-field stuff that alienated some people, right? Like on the court and basketball-wise, fine, but there were extracurriculars that didn't sit well. Jason Kelce doesn't have that stuff. But I said this earlier. I said the Eagles lost a leader, but the city of Philadelphia, I don't say lost. He's still going to be around, but as a player, the city lost a leader here as far as an active voice of an active player because he stepped up to talk about Ben Simmons. He didn't mention him by name, but he was talking about Ben Simmons, and that's when he gave the talk about, you know, people say it's hard to play in this town. I think it's easy to play in this town. He was talking about Simmons, and shortly thereafter, I think he was shipped out of town. So Jason Kelce has a voice that has resonated across the city down there, and again, he's not going anywhere.
Well, great stuff, Mike. Hey, appreciate you, brother. Always, you know, it's going to be a busy time next couple of weeks. We're going to have you back on the show. And coming up next, Jeffri Chadiha is going to let us know what teams have to have a spectacular offseason. We know the Bears have draft picks and a tradable quarterback, but do they lead his list? Ooh, Jeffri Chadiha's got some good stuff coming up next on the NFL Report. Oh boy, we are back at the NFL Report. Steve White's here with James Palmer. We're joined by our guy, Jeffri Chadiha, who's got his new first read column dropping on Tuesday. Jeff, welcome back to the show. It has been a minute, and we are here to stir it up. So Jeff, your column,
as always.
Well, I've seen Jeff in person at Indy a bunch. Yeah.
Okay.
You remember seeing me?
Uh-oh. Hey now. Hey now.
Half the times.
There we go.
Night. We saw him in the early mornings.
I wasn't there. I don't need to hear any of this. You guys can inform me off the air, please. All right, so Jeff, your column is dealing with teams that need to knock it out of the park this offseason. We understand every team needs to hit on their draft picks or free agent acquisitions or coaching hires, things like that. But you're starting this off saying the Houston Texans, who the past 2 years have had great drafts, I think that they lead the field in having to hit a home run here. What do you mean by this?
Well, I'm taking a big, bold prediction here, making a big, bold prediction here that, you know, you can talk about the Bengals and the Bills and the Ravens, but the team that's best positioned to really give the Chiefs a run for their money in the AFC is going to be the Houston Texans. They get things right real quick. I'll go with the Houston Texans right now because C.J. Stroud looks that good. They've been that good in terms of player acquisition and drafting. And they have so much money to work with, $78 million in salary cap space. They can go out and fill a lot of needs right now. If they want to, you know, get help on the defensive line, they can go after a Chris Jones. They want to go get a cornerback. They can go make a trade for Jarius Sneed or go after a Jalen Johnson from Chicago Bears. You talked about Christian Wilkins being out there in free agency. He could be a guy they look at. A running back, Saquon Barkley, could be a guy they go after. So a lot of big name players out there. I'm really pumping up Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans right now, but I think that they are primed make a run at the AFC in the next couple of years if they do things right.
I like that, Jeff. I love that.
I love that, Jeff, honestly. Jeff mentioned the $70 million in space they have. They also have more free agents than anybody else in football, so they do got to fill a lot of different spots. What I look at is the one name that Steve that he said was Chris Jones. I'm not saying they're getting Chris Jones, but I am saying that's a focal point for DeMeco Ryans. That defensive line is a huge aspect of what he wants to do in terms of building this team. You saw what he did in 1 year in terms of where they were able to take a jump as a defensive line. I think this is now a destination. I think Jeff's kind of right. I mean, you come to Texas, you come to Houston, you want to play for DeMeco Ryans and you want to play with C.J. Stroud. Their perception in the league has dramatically changed in 1 year. How about jumping over to the NFC and the Detroit Lions? They're right there, Jeff. Why do they have to have a massive offseason?
They're right there because they need to get over the hump. You're not getting over the hump just by staying pat. And so when you look at what they have to do, again, I'm looking at even more than the Texans' defense. Finding a way to get a pass rusher in there to help Aiden Hutchinson.
Yes.
Again, you will hear Chris Jones' name a lot in this list because he is that big of a name and he can have that big of an impact. But adding a second pass rusher there, like a Chris Jones, like somebody like Minnesota's Danielle Hunter, who's going to be out there, who's going to be free, that could help them out a lot. You go to the back end. Again, I mentioned Jalen Johnson, who they've seen in that division with Chicago. I really believe they're able to make some moves in free agency. And I know Brad Holmes, their general manager, is not a big free agency guy, but they are so close. One or two players here, big splash guys, puts them over the top of the NFC.
I want to jump in real quick on that, Jeff. What Brad Holmes is a great evaluator of cornerbacks. It was a big role that he had with the Rams. And that is a big need that they have, whether they fill it in the draft or free agency. Him evaluating personally the cornerback spot, which is a need for them, I think is a big part of their offseason.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so Chicago, first pick, 9th pick, probably get some capital when they trade Justin Fields. We don't know what that will be. Now, you say this is a team that needs to knock it out of the park. Obviously so, because Matt Eberflus is on a 1-year life preserver to add to all of that, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, I don't even think it's about Eberflus. It's about them being in the position everybody would love to be in, where they got a ton of money. They've got the first pick in the draft. They got the 9th pick in the draft. And they have to make a splash because they can't not make a splash. All those things going in their favor. I mean, how can you can't screw this up. You have to do something that gets people going, excited about your franchise. And so, look, what's that? What are you going to say?
Maybe you can screw it up. Don't put it out there, Jeff.
There's a history there. There's a history.
Right. Caleb Williams, a good draft pick. Look, as soon as they trade Justin Fields, everything falls in place for these guys. And I'm excited for Ryan Poles, who's been with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's been waiting for this opportunity to draft his own quarterback. And again, they can, with a lot of money, Chris Jones once again makes sense. Danielle Hunter makes sense. I think Antoine Winfield Jr., they got rid of Eddie Jackson at safety, could be a guy who they look at.
Ooh.
And certainly you can find some second-tier receivers out there to help your offense if you're going to draft a receiver. So Gabe Davis, Marquise Brown, Josh Reynolds. I can see a lot of guys wind up in Chicago.
Number 9 pick, brother. They're going to get somebody right there in the draft at wide receiver, too.
No, they're sitting pretty.
That's a good call, and I think there are 31 teams that want Antoine Winfield Jr. 32 if he doesn't, include Tampa as well. Everybody would like to get their hands on him. I love what you're saying. The biggest thing to me, Jeff, that stands out is in their evaluation process of Caleb Williams, because I'm joking about maybe you can't screw this up. A big part, I'm told, is making sure his makeup can handle playing quarterback for the Chicago Bears. It is almost, as some people around the league say, a difficult, maybe cursed position. It is just a hard spot to succeed in. We just haven't seen it in that sense. How does he handle stepping into that? It's been a big part of their evaluation. And sticking with quarterback, the Atlanta Falcons, you need a big offseason when you are, as they put it, a quarterback away as a roster.
Yep.
Yeah, and that really is the only move they have to make here. It's not about a bunch of moves, big offseason splash moves. It's about one move. It's about quarterback. And I feel like Kirk Cousins is going to end up being that quarterback. Just talking to people at the Combine, it just seems like the Vikings would love to have him back. We all know when teams start talking about how much they love you, how much they want to keep you, that's always the scarlet letter, so to speak, when it comes to free agency. And I just don't feel as if the Vikings are going to go the extra mile, spend the money it's going to take to keep Kirk Cousins happy. His wife's from Atlanta, Zach Robinson, who's an ex-Rams coach, who he knows that system, the same system as Kevin O'Connell runs. He was with those guys. He knows Raheem Morris. There's a lot of things tying him to Atlanta right now that makes sense. The biggest thing being, we know Kirk Cousins loves his money. They got money to spend on him.
Thank you. Everyone's just like, hey, we know Kirk's this guy, that guy. He loves his paper. Quarterbacks are paid what they are today because of Kirk Cousins
cash
and Washington franchising him 3 times. Real quick, you've got the Colts here at number 5. And James and I found this very interesting because is it really that pressing? Because Anthony Richardson, is basically going to be a rookie playing again. Don't they have more of a grace period, so to speak?
Well, that would be the case if they were in a different division, but they're in the AFC South. And we've seen the Jacksonville Jaguars go from being the worst team in football to being division champion. We've seen the Texans do it last year. And if you're the Colts, you cannot stand pat and just think it's all going to work out in your favor. You got 2 young quarterbacks in your division. You got a couple smart general managers who've made some moves here. And I know Chris Ballard, just as, Brad Holmes is not a big, let's go after and be big in free agency type guy, but they got to make some smart moves. They got to be more explosive on offense around their quarterback, Anthony Richardson. They got to get better on defense and on back end. They got to find another edge rusher. And so I look at corner, I look at safety, I look at edge rusher, defensive tackle, and certainly receiver and tight end. They got to fill those positions and be ready to go because that division is not – they don't be third place in that division next season.
Man, we're talking about the AFC South completely differently than we used to talk about the AFC South. And they got Shane Steichen. They did hit on the coach a year ago. I think that's almost solidified already. Real quick, Jeff, the other team you were talking about or maybe curious about putting on this list, the Philadelphia Eagles. I want your take on Philly right now because that is one of the more interesting spots in terms of an offseason, especially with Howie Roseman running the show.
It is, and we know Howie Roseman always loves to make big moves and is certainly a genius when it comes to player acquisition. But I was thinking about them more so because of the culture. They obviously have to find help at linebacker and they got to get faster at corner. But to me, it's really more about how they handle all the things that went on last year at the end of the season. They've got 2 new coordinators coming in, and Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, so that'll help. But really, it's more of a locker room thing. So I felt like those other teams we just mentioned, they can make some moves and be better just because of that. The Eagles got to get through some things that are a lot more complicated.
Okay. I dig it. It is complicated, and you know what they do? They know how to fix things quickly in Philadelphia. Howie Rose is one of the best at flipping a roster or flipping a culture, or however he does it. They find their way to get back pretty quick into the mix, and we'll see if that can happen. Jeff, appreciate it. Thanks for throwing me under the bus at the beginning of the segment. I did enjoy my time in Indianapolis. I'll talk to you soon, buddy. Yeah.
Okay. That's good, man.
Yeah, thanks. All right, coming up on the NFL Report on Thursday, we will have a brand spanking new show. Lance Zierlein was at the Combine covering every single aspect of this draft. We'll have him join the show. Mark Ross was on the field watching all of it. He will join the show, and Jane Slater as well. What happens with the Dallas Cowboys? We hinted at a running back, a big-name running back. We'll see what Jane says on Thursday, 7 o'clock Eastern on the NFL Report. Welcome back to the NFL Report. James Palmer, Steve Wyche with you. We'd like to remember, I believe, Steve, everyone's friend. Chris Mortensen from ESPN passed away at the age of 72. And really, Steve, from myself and a lot of younger journalists, maybe yourself included, a North Star, essentially, in terms of reporting, being accurate, sourcing, but more importantly, integrity, kindness, generosity, things that oftentimes fall by the wayside in our business because of the competitive nature of it. I have in front of me just messages that Mort has sent me that are they just feel different, Steve, than getting a compliment or any type of just connection with another reporter when it comes from Mort. Hey, we're a dying breed. Keep doing what you're doing. That he respects the way you're doing it with integrity. That ability to reach out to those colleagues, and whether they're friends of his or not, he still found a way to reach out to them, Steve, and always kind of just have such a respect for our business. That's the part that I'll remember the most about Mort.
Yeah, even-handed, like you said, developed great trust. You're somebody, no matter who you were, he always found a way to build you up. One of the great human beings ever in our business. He was one of the first insiders, him and Lenny Pasquarelli, both Atlanta guys, our ties to Atlanta, who broke big news. broke important news, but they broke it with the integrity that had everybody trusting them. Mort, rest in power. James and I felt the need just to, say condolences to your family and all those who loved him. We want to thank all of our guests for today's show on the NFL Report, and also listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcast.